The journey to Feldcroft was quiet, too quiet. Sebastian had spent most of the train ride staring out the window, his fingers tapping absently against his knee. I knew better than to break the silence. Whatever was waiting for him in Feldcroft, it was already clawing at the edges of his mind. I had never been here before, never seen the place where Sebastian had grown up. Feldcroft was smaller than I expected, a collection of houses scattered against rolling fields, quiet and unassuming, yet weighed down by something unseen. A place that had known loss, a place that had never truly healed. Sebastian led me up a winding dirt path toward his uncle's home, a modest stone house sitting beneath the shadow of the ruined manor. The manor from my dream. The sight of it made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to focus. We weren't here for that, not yet. He didn't knock before opening the door. He just walked in, his shoulders tense, jaw set, like he was bracing for impact.
Anne?
We found her seated near the fireplace, a thick quilt draped over her lap, Sebastian's twin. She looked so much like him, the same sharp eyes, the same defiant curve of her lips. But where Sebastian was restless energy, Anne was stillness. Her skin was pale, her hands curled in her lap as if holding back pain no one else could feel. And yet, when she looked up at her brother, she smiled. I stayed near the door as he crouched beside her chair, taking her hands in his. For a moment, I saw him as he must have been before everything fell apart.
You must be the new 5th year Sebastian told me about. It's nice to meet you, by the way.
It's nice to meet you, Anne.
For a moment it felt normal, like things hadn't fallen apart, like we were just two siblings catching up after months apart, like the curse hadn't stolen everything from her. And then Solomon entered the room, and everything shattered.
And who exactly is this?
Her name is Eveleigh.
And I suppose she's another one of your enablers?
I
don't recall you ever mentioning her. How long has this been going on?
That's none of your concern.
Everything concerning you is my concern when you bring strangers into my house.
The air grew thick with tension. Solomon's stare was sharp, laced with irritation, not just at Sebastian, but at me, as if my very presence was an insult. I understood now. Sebastian hadn't told him about me on purpose, not because I wasn't important, but because Solomon would find a reason to turn me into another excuse to throw at his nephew, another weight to press against him. Sebastian's hands curled into fists at his sides, his entire body wound too tight, too ready to snap.
I don't need your approval, I never have.
You need something, boy. A leash, perhaps, because every time you show up, you leave destruction in your wake.
That's rich coming from the man who's already given up.
What did you just say?
Before he could answer, Anne gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound, her body tensing, her hands clutching at the arms of her chair. Pain. Sudden, searing pain. Sebastian was at her side in an instant, his anger dissolving into fear as he reached for her, his voice frantic. But the moment had already passed, leaving only the raw edges of suffering behind. And Solomon blamed him for it.
This is what happens when you come back, when you bring your chaos into this house.
You think this is my fault? I couldn't do this. Not here. Not now. I shot to my feet and turned toward the door, my pulse roaring in my ears. I needed air. I needed to get out before I said something I couldn't take back. I barely noticed Eveleigh watching me as I stormed out of the house, but I knew she wouldn't stay silent.
The door shut behind him, leaving the room in thick silence. Anne's breathing was slow, controlled, though the remnants of pain still lingered in her eyes. And Solomon just stood there, unmoved, as if he hadn't just driven a knife through his own nephew's chest. I took a slow breath, turning to face him. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. You weren't fair to him.
I don't need to be fair, I need to be right.
And were you, right? To say that to him? To push him away when all he wants is to help?
You don't understand what you're talking about.
Neither do you. A thick silence stretched between us, heavy and unrelenting. Solomon's expression was carved from stone, his gaze piercing, but I didn't flinch. I could feel the weight of his disapproval pressing against me, but it wasn't enough to make me step back. Not when I knew I was right. He exhaled sharply, his fingers curling into fists at his sides. There was anger there, frustration, but something else too. Fear.
Sebastian needs someone to tell him the truth, not someone to coddle him.
And you think tearing him down is the way to do that? You think treating him like a lost cause will save him?
He's already lost, he just doesn't see it yet.
I sucked in a breath, my hands tightening at my sides. How could he say that? About his own nephew? I wanted to yell, to shake him and make him see what he was doing. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Solomon had already made up his mind. I took a step back, but not in surrender, in defiance. You're wrong about him.
And what makes you so sure?
Because I see him. Not who you think he is. Not the version of him you've convinced yourself will fail. I see him, and I won't give up on him. Something flickered in his eyes then. Doubt? Regret? I couldn't tell. But before he could speak, I turned on my heel and walked out the door. The wind outside was sharp, biting against my skin as I stepped into the cold air. My breath came fast, my pulse pounding. Sebastian stood by the fence, his back to me, his hands clenched at his sides. He didn't move when I approached, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. He had heard. Sebastian.
I shouldn't have come.
That is not true.
Isn't it? Nothing ever changes here. He'll always hate me for trying, and Anne will always be the one who suffers for it.
That is not your fault.
Perhaps not, but it doesn't change the fact that I can't fix it. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But as I looked at her, at the quiet certainty in her eyes, at the way she stood there refusing to let me sink, I felt something twist inside me. She believed in me, even when I couldn't. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.
The wind stirred the silence between us, carrying the distant echo of waves crashing against the cliffs. Sebastian hadn't moved since I had come outside, his hands still curled into fists at his sides. He was trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. I stepped closer, hesitating for only a moment before resting a hand against his arm. He flinched, just slightly, but didn't pull away. You don't have to pretend with me.
I'm fine.
No, you're not. And that's all right.
Her words chipped away at the wall I was trying to hold up. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to push her away. But I couldn't, because she was here, and she wasn't leaving. He's never going to see me as anything but a failure, no matter what I do, no matter how hard I try.
That's not true. He's just too blinded by his own pain to see it. But I see you, Sebastian. I see how hard you fight, how much you care. You are not a failure. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I thought he was going to argue. But then, he exhaled, some of the tension bleeding from his shoulders. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw it. The raw emotion, the exhaustion, the anger still burning beneath the surface. But there was something else too, a quiet kind of gratitude.
You always know what to say, don't you?
Someone has to keep you from spiraling.
I'd be a bloody mess without you. The moment stretched between us, the weight of everything that had happened still pressing against my ribs. But it wasn't unbearable anymore, not with her here. And then she turned, her gaze shifting toward the ruins above us. Something flickered in her expression. Determination, curiosity.
We need to go up there.
Are you sure about this?
Yes, I have to see it for myself.
I had been up here before, but I had never gone inside. The manor had always felt cursed, a relic of something best left forgotten. Now, walking up its cracked stone steps with Eveleigh beside me, I had the distinct feeling that we were stepping into something neither of us could walk away from. She reached for the heavy wooden door, and the moment her fingers touched it, a sound echoed through the ruins. A rustling, sharp and unnatural, breaking the stillness of the air. We weren't alone.
Before Sebastian could say anything, a flicker of movement in the shadows. Dark figures, watching, waiting. Then, a voice.
Deadly mistake coming here, the both of you. You've both stumbled into your own grave.
Who's there? Show yourself. They emerged from the darkness like wraiths, their robes blending with the ruins, their eyes gleaming with something dangerous, hungry. Rookwood's men. I knew the type. Mercenaries, killers, scavengers looking to take what wasn't theirs. And if they were here, that meant one thing. They were waiting for us.
You've been poking around in things you shouldn't, boy, and you're the one we want.
You have no idea what you're dealing with.
Oh, I think we do. And you're going to come with us, one way or another.
I didn't wait for them to make the first move. I wasn't going to let them take her. My wand was already raised before the first spell was fired.
Reducto!
Then, chaos erupted.